I think even though the fact that it's already been 10 years, I think for many of them the grief of the loss and the kind of immensity of the loss in that area is still with them, very strongly today. They still struggle 10 years on, and it feels just as immediate to them as it did that day of the massive earthquake and tsunami.
How has it altered people's routines and behaviour?
I think for a lot of people who lived by the coast, they've moved away, they've had to go into temporary housing. For many of them, their sense of security and safety in their own lives have kind of been upended. And, for many people, it's drastically changed their lifestyle and their purpose in life.
Yes, because in your reporting, you've spoken to some who just seem to be trapped in the grief of the moment and almost finding it very hard to accept that they've lost their loved ones.
Sure. There's still 2,500 people who are still missing to this day, 10 years on. And for families that didn't get their loved ones' remains or didn't find anybody after the disaster, it's been extremely difficult for them to move on. I wrote recently an article about a woman who wrote hundreds of letters to her husband who went missing in the tsunami, and he's clearly was washed away by the tsunami, but she couldn't accept that and refused to file a death certificate for 6 years until after the tsunami. So a lot of people kind of still, in the thick of that grief.
Yes,
still.
and pain. Yet there's been a very practical and substantial rebuilding process. How effective has that been?
The Japanese government has poured trillions of yen into rebuilding that area. And if you talk to the locals there, they are appreciative of the government's efforts. They've built a massive seawall that kind of obscures any view of the ocean and prevents any kind of future flooding. But at the same time, the buildings have come back. But these cities that were worst hit by the disaster lost thousands and thousands of residents who've moved away and don't want to live by the sea. So the opinions of the locals about the recovery efforts have been really, really mixed. I mean, the cities that they lost have not come back.
And in terms of they've lost the cities, they might have rebuilt, but is there the trust to come back to the area?
I think that's the biggest issue, especially in the wake of the nuclear accident, especially in areas of Fukushima. There is a public trust issue. And I think, for many of the residents and the evacuees who had to move away, who had to leave their homes behind, for many of them, they were promised that they would get their hometowns back. And obviously the government has spent, again, billions of dollars into decontaminating these areas, cutting down shrubbery, trying to get the radiation low enough for people to come back. But even when the radiation is low enough and they've declared it safe, only about a third of original residents have returned to these areas near the plant. So that's clearly, if you talk to these people, they say it's not just about a safety issue and their concern about their children and bringing back their families. It's about their sense of trust in the nuclear utility, TEPCO, and the government.
And of course, some have taken lawsuits or have sought compensation. Have they been supported in those efforts, or are they sometimes shunned because of that?
Actually, one of the women that I interviewed for my piece, a tsunami survivor who lost a 6-year-old to a tsunami, her and a few of the parents sued the school that put their children on a school bus towards the coast right after the earthquake. And as I was interviewing her, a local man came up to her, and to me as well, asking her how much she got in the settlement and kind of suggesting that she shouldn't have gone to court. And, she said this is not even the first time this has happened. This happens quite often. And there is a real division within the community that doesn't go, reported that often. There's a lot of support as well, but there's also a lot of division about how families should or should not have responded after the disaster.
Is it something cultural in Japan? Because I know there's sometimes a lot of shame associated in terms of going public. Do you think part of it is a cultural thing that suppresses this ability to grieve properly or get closure?
I think partly. I also think these are cities, but they're also in the northern region. It's still rural compared to Tokyo. People are not used to going to therapists. Counseling services are available, but for many older, especially men, it's the hurdle to get that help is extremely difficult. And when it comes to the kind of division about compensation and going to court, I think this is, as you said, it's quite deep-rooted. I think civil lawsuits are still considered fairly uncommon compared to countries like the United States. And I think, yeah, there's absolutely a sense of shame, after this natural disaster. Why are you causing trouble by going to court?
Mari, really lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.